during Wednesday's debacle of a town hall, Donald Trump made it abundantly clear he's running to finish the job he started on January 6th. The indicted ex-president showed no remorse for the insurrection he incited. Why would he? As part of an attempt to overturn the results of a free and fair election he lost. Rather, he once again said he would pardon many of the insurrectionists who acted as the foot soldiers in his war on American democracy on what he called a beautiful day. In case you needed even more convincing that Trump is gearing up once again to attack the very foundations of American democracy, look at who he wants by his side in the White House next time. A new report in Rolling Stone says Trump is considering a key administration position for Michael Flynn, the disgraced former national security advisor who pled guilty to lying to the FBI about communications he had with a Russian official and reportedly floated invoking martial law to help overturn the 2020 election. Trump is also apparently angling once again to put Jeffrey Clark in a top job. He's the formerly obscure DOJ staffer who tried to get himself installed as Attorney General of the United States after the 2020 election so he could sort of commandeer the entire Department of Justice to weaponize it on behalf of Donald Trump and overturn the results to install Trump as the winner. Joining me now is Noah Shachtman, editor-in-chief of Rolling Stone, which broke this latest reporting on Trump's inner circle. Noah, I guess I'd first start with, Trump says a lot of things, and there's a lot of people around him. Like, how sure are we that these are people that he really still thinks of as loyalists and wants to have in the admin?
Yeah, we're pretty sure, man. Look, these are people that Trump has been, in the case of Flynn, right? He's been a Trump ally since before the 2016 election. Flynn famously stood up for Trump at the Republican National Convention in 2016. And Trump loves that kind of loyalty. Similarly, Jeffrey Clark was one of the key architects in this harebrained scheme to try to have alternate electors in the 2020 election in key battleground states. And Trump loves that. And if you go on Jeffrey Clark's Twitter feed now, it is nothing but Trump, 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 MAGA, MAGA, MAGA. And so, yeah, he is really serious about both of these guys. With Clark, he has floated the idea of him becoming Attorney General for real this time, which is nuts. And with Flynn, he recognizes that Flynn is so toxic that he couldn't pass a Senate confirmation hearing, and so he's looking for some other role in the national security apparatus for him.
Yeah, let me read from Aswan Subsang's great reporting on this. On Clark, Trump's enthusiasm for Clark comes in spite of his mounting legal troubles, which is something to keep in mind here, which are directly related to his and Trump's schemes to subvert the democratic order. FBI agents searched Clark's home, seized his phone as part of special counsel Jack Smith's investigation into efforts to subvert the 2020 election. And then on the case of Flynn, in at least one conversation, Trump was self-aware enough to say any senior role for Flynn would probably have to be a non-Senate confirmed appointment. One of the things I think that's come through here is, there's the team crazy and team normal distinction that Bill Stepien talked about in that January 6th committee deposition. Now, frankly, I think that's a bit much because Bill Stepien was there most of the time, so it was self-serving. But what was clear is that there's that one meeting, the nutty meeting, right, where the Overstock guy is there and I don't know who else. Those group of people, that's gonna be the core of the government in a Trump second term. That seems very clear.
Yeah, and at least at this point, team crazy is ready to take over and become the team. Look, Clark, this is just how wild and how nutty this guy is. You may remember there's an infamous meeting in the White House in which the very Trumpy director of national intelligence, Radcliffe, said, look, we have no evidence whatsoever that a foreign power interfered in the vote tallies. And this guy, Clark, he said, wait a minute, I've heard that the Dominion voting machines, that Dominion, the same one that was in the fight with Fox, the Dominion voting machines were hacked by China because of some kind of smart thermostat hookup.
Right. Yeah, that's
wild.
Right, and that's the person that he was trying to get to sort of topple the DOJ. We should also note that, again, Swin's reporting here says that he's considering the people that this is not hidden in the sense that there's this Trump-aligned event happening, I think, at Doral, and you've got there Michael Flynn, Mike Pillow's going to be there, Peter Navarro is going to be there, Roger Stone, Devin Nunes, Eric Trump, a few like out-and-out anti-Semites / Holocaust deniers did get booted from the bill, I think, after my colleague Rachel Maddow brought some attention to them. But again, the waters he's swimming in are solely these waters, as far as I can tell, and based on Swin and others reporting.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And the other part of this is there's a heavy Christian nationalist part to it, too. Flynn, in particular, has built this infrastructure over the last several years in which he is trying to basically subvert religion, subvert Christianity in support of Donald Trump, who is not exactly a holy guy. But they have made it their mission to kind of suborn Christianity in support of their kind of neo-fascist political agenda. And Flynn is right at the center of that.